Hi everyone, welcome to World Have Your Say. I'm Lucy Hawkins. In today's programme, Europe at a crossroads. There's a growing banking crisis in Spain, while in Greece, many people are saying it's inevitable that the country will have to leave the Eurozone. If you've got savings in Greece or in Spain, how worried are you? Get in touch with your questions. We've got economists from Germany, Spain and Greece all standing by to take your questions. Our hashtag, as always, is WHYS. You can contact us via the Facebook page at facebook.com/World Have Your Say. Hi, I'm Lucy Hawkins. Welcome to World Have Your Say. We're talking about the future of the Eurozone. There's lots to cover, so let's get the conversation going. Raphael joins us. He's a German student here in London. Maria is a journalist in Athens, and Pedro Schwartz is a professor of economics in Madrid. Maria, I can start with you. You are in the eye of the storm there in Athens. How is everyone feeling?
Well, we definitely are, Lucy. I think everybody here is very, very, very concerned. We had a better day today. We actually saw bank stocks rally, and we saw the atmosphere in the banks being much more quiet. Everybody's getting ready to head for an election, obviously. So it's just now a few days left till the elections are formally declared. Everybody's anticipating the result. Everybody's worried whether, and the big worry is whether this election will actually produce a viable government or whether it will further complicate matters by yet again producing a result that essentially will lead Greek politicians to quarrel, to have yet another round of horse trading, only to end up pretty much in the same spot. People are worried about how Syriza will do. Big parties are also worried about how they will fare, seeing that last time they actually bombed, I would have to say. So this is the question. The New Democracy, they're trying to essentially realign themselves with their other right-wing allies. Similar kind of movements are taking place on the left, but we'll still have to see how this all is going to work out.
Raphael, you're from Germany, Europe's strongest economy. What do you think about what's happening in Greece?
Well, I mean, there's a lot happening, I think. I'm very excited. I have very mixed feelings about it. Obviously, from my studies, I have a bit of an economic focus. But also, like, the whole society of Europe and the European idea seems affected. So it's really mixed, I must say.
Do you think that Germany should keep on propping up these weaker economies?
I don't think there's an answer to that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's Germany's task to do that. I think it's the European Union's task. Obviously, Germany has a strong say in the European politics, but not an exclusive say. And I think there's been a lot of politicizing about, you know, Germany as a role model and Germany should do this and that. I'm not sure whether that's the right approach. Actually, it's just, you know, that's incenting a lot of tensions on a societal basis, I think.
We're seeing some pictures of protests taking place in Greece at the moment. Maria, how do people in Greece feel about the Germans at the moment? Are they hopeful that they will step up and continue helping you out?
They certainly are. I have to say I've been speaking to a lot of people today. I've been asking them whether they think the whole mess is the mistake of the Greek politicians, the German politicians, or somebody else. Most of them think that the larger part of the blame lies with Greek politicians. However, I have to say that there is some feeling that Germany is being unnecessarily harsh with Greeks. The Greeks essentially have gone through a brutal reform program, a brutal austerity program. And many people here think that the Germans should give them some leeway, that they should essentially ease this very, very brutal transition, because essentially, you know, they think that the straw that will break the camel's back is just about land. So we'll have to see. However, I have to also say that they do recognize that there are many, many things that Greeks have to do in order to get out of the situation.
Raphael?
Yeah, so I was just a bit irritated when I hear the Germans should do something. Why is it? I mean, I'm German. Am I supposed to do something? I think it's the politicians in the EU Parliament, in the European zone that should act, and not Germans or only the German politicians. So I was just wondering what
Lucy, that's definitely the feeling here. I don't think anybody's blaming the German people, and I don't think anybody's blaming any other people, essentially. But for better or worse, Ms. Merkel and her very hard rhetoric of the last few years has essentially caused Greeks to identify austerity with the Germans. It may be that other people are also willing to follow the same policy, or other people would like Greece to follow the same policy. For example, the Dutch. They've assumed positions very similar, or the Austrians, and so on and so on. However, it's Ms. Merkel, possibly because Germany is the biggest country in Europe, or rather the strongest economy in Europe at the moment, and it seems to be booming while everybody else is actually facing severe problems, and certainly the Mediterranean countries and Ireland, as well as Portugal. So somehow Germany, and specifically Ms. Merkel, has become some sort of figurehead in this crisis. But I have to say that, on the other hand, the Greeks, they are looking to the Germans also for other types of help. For example, we've seen bookings from Germany for holidays drop dramatically. Now, this is a very, very popular destination for German tourists. In fact, Greek tourism depends on German and UK tourism.
Maria, I'm just going to interrupt you there for a minute, because I want to bring in Martina Steves, who is a Greek journalist who joins us also from Brussels. Martina, is it your feeling that Greeks understand the enormity of what could happen to the country if indeed they do have to leave the euro?
No, I think they absolutely do. I think they're very aware of the repercussions. I think a part of the Greek population thinks that the effects of a euro exit is somewhat exaggerated to threaten them into voting for a more conservative government that would stick to the reform plans. However, I think that by and large, Greeks definitely want to stay in the euro. I think 75 to 80% of them said so in recent polls. And I also think that they understand the effects of leaving the euro and going into the wilderness of the new drachma, the currency that they used to use before the euro.
We saw some pictures earlier from May of unrest on the streets in Greece and some protests. I wanted to bring in a comment that we had from Yanis, who is in Greece. He has asked, can Greece cope with the political and social unrest that could follow a euro exit? Can I put that question to you, Martina, and also Maria? Martina first.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? I didn't
the question was from Yanis in Greece, who wants to know if the country can cope with the social unrest if they indeed have to exit the euro.
I think that would depend on what kind of preparations the Greek government and the Greek central bank will have made to manage such an event, such an exit from the euro and a return to the drachma. It is a rather predictable process for Greece specifically, in the sense that you would have capital control. So, for example, money wouldn't be able to leave the country. You would probably have some kind of rationing of how much money you could take out of your bank. And all these things would certainly create panic. Would Greece be able to cope with that? Well, I think what we can say for sure is that the Greek administrative system has proven to be very weak, and panic is something very deep. And indeed, in Greece, people would be justified in panicking. So it would certainly be a rather explosive and unpredictable situation.
Do you agree, Maria?
Yes, I think it depends on a lot of factors, but you have to realize that Greece is essentially an economy that doesn't produce very much. Even though, for example, many people might think that Greece produces agricultural goods. In fact, a great percentage of the Greek foodstuffs, something like over 70%, is actually imported. The same goes for oil, the same goes for fuel. So Greeks would suddenly find themselves overnight in a position where they wouldn't be able to pay, essentially, to heat their homes or to eat. This would certainly, I think, cause great stress in society in general. Now, how this would be faced down, if you want, if there would be riots erupting or if there would be civil unrest. I've been hearing a lot about this. Obviously, nobody can predict what will happen. But I would certainly think the Greek authorities would find themselves in a very, very difficult position if that was the case. And I definitely think that Martina is right, that everything should be planned out. Now, we have a real possibility, or at least we've got a possibility on the table, that Greece will be forced to leave the euro. So it's up to the authorities, both Greek and European, I would have to say, because it obviously affects everyone to put in place the safeguards needed to make sure, first of all, that Greek people don't starve, and secondly, that the situation is kept as best as possible under control.
Okay, well, I wanted to bring in this comment. Oh, Martina, yes? Sorry, continue.
Sorry, that wasn't me.
Oh, I just wanted to bring in a comment for you, Antonio, on our Facebook page. And this actually is quite a common thread that we've seen on our Facebook page today. Greece needs to build a better economy, Antonio says. Instead of relying on tourism, Greeks need to stop wasting time and start working hard like us Germans. You have so much work to do now, so just do it. Martina, does that get your back up?
No, I think that's a slightly unfair comment that really panders to that kind of cliche of the lazy Greeks. I take issue with that, and I think figures and statistics take issue with that, and reality takes issue with that. If there were work for Greeks to do, believe you me, Greeks would be doing it. However, unemployment rate is over 21%, youth unemployment over 50%. So if there were jobs, Greeks would be doing them. Greeks happen to be among the very well-educated, multilingual, among the best educated workforces in Europe. There is a clear disconnect between the educational system and market needs. There is a clearly sort of perverted and wrongly structured labor market. And absolutely, there is a huge amount that is wrong with the Greek economy. That is exactly why the only good part about the Greek adjustment program, is the structural reforms that aim to put these good people who are educated to good jobs that can produce. If that's services, that's great. By the way, tourism, there's nothing wrong with tourism. Tourism is a productive industry, and it works very well in other countries, and there's no reason why it shouldn't in Greece. So I would take issue with two things there. The one is, of course, the Greek economy needs to be deeply restructured in a way that can be geared towards a 21st century developed market economy. No issues there. I won't disagree with that. Also, Greeks are not lazy, and I'm sure that if there were jobs to be doing, they would be doing them.
Okay, let's bring in an economist to get a wider view on all of this. Dr. Kristen Schultz is with us, a senior economist at the London Berenberg Bank. Thank you for being with us. Firstly, just give us your sort of overview of what you think is going to happen now with Greece.
Well, first of all, austerity in the very broad sense is a very potent medicine for any economy. We've seen it many times in the past, and Germany is one good example. Germany had structural reforms combined with fiscal austerity in 2004, and the result of that is what we see now, a booming economy, a golden decade, even though there's, of course, a lot of fluctuation around that, especially depending on the Eurozone situation. But austerity is also a medicine that if you take too much of it, it really seriously harms the patient. And it's clear from the situation in Greece that this is what happened there. So there needs to be a lot more flexibility from the side of the Germans, but more broadly from the Troika of the European Central Bank, the IMF and the EU Commission, to really deal with the problems that arise in Greece along the way of these reforms. And the elections did one good thing is they reminded us of the situation in Greece, and they really triggered a bit of rethinking also on the German side. We've had Angela Merkel say that the conditions need to be adhered to, but there is some room for negotiation, and that, I think, is an offer to Greece.
Okay, plenty more to discuss there. Dr. Schultz, thank you very much. A good point there on how Greece can grow with all of these austerity measures. We're going to be talking more about that soon. Do stay with us here on World Have Your Say. Nuala, who is taking all of your calls at the World Have Your Say newsroom. The line's busy, Nuala.
They are indeed, and a good range of countries coming in. Let me read a few of them that have just got in touch. Javi in Sweden says the EU is at a crossroads right now. It will be impossible to sustain the European Union. So I guess he feels he knows what way that road is going to go. A couple of calls coming in from Germany. Ronan in Germany says, my friends and I here, we don't want to support a failed state because support for the Greeks is not there because they don't want to act on reforms. We want to shore up Spain and Portugal. Richard called in also from Germany. He's got a controversial proposal. He says that the way forward for Greece is to sell some of their islands. He mentions Crete and Corfu, so we could hear what your Greek guests think about that. And we also had Michael in Cyprus getting in touch. He said the problem in Greece and Cyprus is that people give jobs to relatives. Now, this has been a thread that has been through some of our discussions this week, so that's another talking point for your guests. If you do want to get in touch, you can go to facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay, or indeed you can tweet us, as the hashtag is WHYS, or give us a call and keep us busy.
Nuala, thanks very much for joining us. So that suggestion there of perhaps selling a Greek island, I wanted to bring you a tweet from Daniel, who says that maybe Greece should have discussions with Facebook, probably worth more than the euro at the moment, given that initial share offer for Facebook was the biggest ever, raised more than $18 billion, and the value of the company now $100 billion. So some interesting comments coming in at the moment. Raphael, if I could bring you back in, I know you have a few questions for some of our economists. What's the key thing for you at the moment?
You know, people talked about the elections. Something that I've been wondering is, how does, you know, everyone keeps saying Greece wants to stay in the Eurozone and wants to keep the euro and everything of that, but how do the elections reflect that, you know? A strong support for extremist parties, how does that reflect support for Europe?
Martina, I think you're best placed to answer that.
Well, I think, frankly, there is a serious problem here. This country's political scene has been kept together by two major governing parties that have interchangeably been in government for the last 30 years, PASOK and New Democracy, socialist and conservative respectively. These two parties were largely blamed for the crisis and therefore basically saw their polling collapse in those elections. A lot of the vote that we saw in the May 6th election was protest vote. I believe that's exactly why we saw such a high polling numbers for even neo-Nazi parties like Golden Dawn. And that was so that kind of discontent was reflected in the fragmentation. However, I think we should be reminded that Greeks want to stay in the euro. What I would say some people who are voting left are taking issue with is that they don't believe that there is a real chance that the European Union and the European Central Bank are ready to and are prepared to throw Greece out of the euro. Therefore, when Angela Merkel, when Olli Rehn here in Brussels, or José Manuel Barroso say Greece has to choose between the euro and austerity and continued adherence to this program, or can vote the other way and then find itself outside the euro, they think that's a bluff. And they think they should be calling their bluff. Now, is this a bluff? Is it not a bluff? I don't know. And I don't really think that people who are saying these words do know. But I think that what we perceive as tension between staying in the euro, sticking to the program, and voting for left-wing parties that want to radically renegotiate or get rid of the financial adjustment program for Greece is something that we perceive as a tension, but some Greek voters don't necessarily feel that way.
Okay, Martina, thanks for that. I wanted to bring in Professor Pedro Schwartz, who joins us from the University of Sao Paulo in Madrid. He's a professor of economics there. And I wanted to bring this question to all three of you that we've had from Gilles in Brussels, who is asking, and this is a common question as well, what is Plan B if the Greeks choose not to be bailed out? Professor Schwartz, do you have an answer for that?
Yes, I do. I think Greece has before it and the European Union a threesome. They have three choices. One is to try and stay in the euro on present conditions, perhaps a little lenient, but mainly trying to reduce costs of production. That is what we economists call an internal devaluation, bringing prices down to be able to sell abroad. That's one, and it's being very harsh, and the population in part are rejecting it because they are suffering. The second one, which has been discussed here, is to say, Greece, please leave the EU. And that is not an easy thing to do. The conditions have been set out. One of them is to have capital controls and control at the borders so that people don't take the euros out. And then what you have to do is still go on with your cuts because you want to sell abroad. However, the devaluation of the drachma, which will help exports, will make life much more difficult because Greece depends so much on imports, mainly of food, among other things. Then that's the middle one. The middle is A, the European Central Bank and the European Commission promise or guarantee all deposits in euros in Greece. so that people are not tempted to have a run on the banks.
Okay, we're going to come back to what's happening with the banks and the worries about the run on the banks in a moment, but I wanted to bring in as well Dr. Christian Scholz. Do you have a plan B?
Well, I thought it was quite interesting, this point about Greece becoming more competitive and that only having to do with the wages in Greece. I don't think that's the case. And if it were the case, then indeed it would be much easier to simply leave the euro, do the external revaluation, and then export loads of things. But that's actually not the biggest problem in Greece. The biggest problem in Greece is all these structures that are in place, which are very inflexible. The administration is very slow. We see this in the implementation of the program. The product markets are closed. All these structural reforms that would simply not happen if Greece leaves the euro, because there wouldn't be an incentive to do that anymore. And the last solution that the professor proposes, this guarantee of deposits, that is going into the direction of using monetary, money in the end, throwing money at the problem and using it via some sort of inflation, and more broadly maybe even in the EU as a whole. And that is indeed another option. But that's not the option under which the Eurozone was constructed.
Professor Schwartz?
No, I think guaranteeing the deposit is so as to keep the amount of money in Greece where it is, because taking deposits out reduces bank money. No, this is not throwing money at the problem, it's simply keeping the payment system going. And then there's a third option, and that is to suspend Greece within the European Union. That can be done mainly by having two parallel currencies, drachmas and euros, as in many countries there are two currencies, and people choose which one they want to deal in. And I think this third option, which is keep the banking system going and also have two currencies so that the costs in drachmas fall and they can export, is something that isn't being explored sufficiently.
Dr. Scholz?
I think that would be extremely difficult, because the ECB, the central bank in Europe that sets the monetary policy for all 17 countries and potentially in the future more countries, it cannot adapt its monetary policy to countries which, most countries just using one currency and others using two currencies. In fact, the ECB is very unhappy about the arrangements in some countries, which the professor mentioned, like Montenegro and others, which use the euro and other currencies at the same time, because these countries are then beyond the control of the monetary policy of the ECB, and that can lead to inflationary risks and all sorts of risks which are beyond the control of the ECB, and therefore not really in line with any of the treaties.
We're getting, just to give you a sense of the calls that we've been receiving, calls from Zambia, from Turkey, from Norway, so not just from countries inside the Eurozone, which brings us also to a comment from Martin on Facebook, who says Greece leaving the euro may well result in a domino effect that could lead to the euro's collapse. That's a real theme today, and obviously a concern for you in Spain, Professor Schwartz, as well.
I do agree. That's why I would like to have the middle solution of suspending Greece, because I do think that financial markets, if they see Greece toppled and sent out of the euro and make a lot of money on that one, because people, these speculators are betting against Greece staying in the euro, then they would turn their attention to Spain and to Italy. I think that step of telling Greece leave the euro could be the end of the Eurozone, and we should think very seriously about a middle solution. And the fact that the European Central Bank cannot control as they wish the supply of money, they can control their own, the supply of euros, and it's for people to choose what currency they want to deal in. And this is something that the ECB and the European institutions cannot understand. They think you can govern the union from the center bureaucratically. There's not enough say for ordinary people in this system.
Okay, Professor Schwartz, thank you for that. Just to bring you another comment that we have from John, who is on the Bloomberg website, saying the Germans are the ones who should leave the euro. This is another plan B. When will the German people finally figure this out? They can leave in an orderly fashion, return to the Deutschmark and let the rest of Europe print their way out of this mess. So some controversial comments coming in. Stay with us here on What Have You Said. Hi, I'm Lucy Hawkins. Welcome to World Have Your Say. After a week of turmoil in Europe around the future of the single currency, we now have a banking crisis in Spain, as well as that ongoing uncertainty in Greece. We want to know if you think Greece should stay in the euro and if you're worried about what this all means for other heavily indebted countries. If you're German, are you happy that your country is propping up Europe? If you want to take part, all our contact details will be on the screen throughout the show. Thanks for being with us. We've still got Martina Esteves, a Greek financial journalist in Brussels, Professor Pedro Schwartz, a professor of economics at the University of São Paulo and Madrid, and we've got Alicia, who joins us now, who is a student in Madrid. Alicia, if I can start with you, it's not been a good day in Spain with the downgrading of the banks. What's the mood there?
Well, we all feel a little worried because of the banks. Our situation is getting similar to Greece's. So we're all worried whether they will consider us like Greece and they will think we'll follow their steps and turn a cold shoulder on us, like they're a bit doing with Greece now. Antonio said previously that Greece were lazy. So I wonder they also think we're lazy and it's our fault and they'll not want to help us. And I would like to ask the other professors, do you think Spain will go after Greece and will get into the bankrupt and irregovernability like they are now in Greece?
Professor Schwartz, can you answer that? Is Spain next?
Yes, I think I can say, first, I'll see what Greece does. I don't give it up. I don't give that country up. And we'll see what the elections say and whether people can get their act together. I think a little, perhaps, postponement of the dates for cuts may help. In the end, we'll see. I think that Greece can put itself together. Even more so with Spain. We have problems with the local authorities, but yesterday they met with the Minister for the Budget and they all agreed to the cuts they had rejected first. So one thing is being solved. The central government is imposing its discipline on them. And the second one is the banks. It was expected from Moody's that they would downgrade because Standard & Poor's had done it the previous week. I think they have a real estate that's a property problem, especially their credits to developers. But the people who have mortgages, families who have mortgages, are holding to them. There aren't so many that are being dispossessed. And again, I think some banks are very solid. Such as, I don't know, Santander, BBVA and Caixa and so on. There are others that should be either shut down or merged, and the government should be decisive. But I don't think all banks or any banks will really go belly up in Spain.
Alicia, can I ask you if there is a sort of concern about your savings, the money that's in the bank?
Yeah, there is.
And what are people doing about it?
Some people are trying to get their savings out of the saving banks because they're in crisis. But we have been said by the government that it's safe and we should keep the savings there. Because if everyone takes their money out, that will be a crisis.
Yes, indeed, there is by law, and I think it's going to be held, that every person has 100,000 euros guarantee on their deposits. So that's one thing that can be financed and will be kept. And then secondly, I do think that the government will find money anywhere in the ECB or in the European Union, if they don't have it, if they have some, to try and save the banks so that people don't worry about those and banks start giving credit to families and firms.
Maria is still with us from Athens. Maria, just hearing Alicia there talk about the concerns in Spain about people's savings, that must be being felt in Greece as well.
It certainly is, and there is a bank guarantee here. It's been in place for a number of years, for well over 2 years. The worry is that people aren't very confident that the government would be able to actually fulfill the obligations it has undertaken. So we have seen in the last few days some sort of slow motion or mini run if you want, on the Greek banks, with Greek savers essentially going to the bank and making withdrawals. I've heard a lot of my friends having this conversation. But I also have to say that this isn't a new phenomenon. It has been happening for the last 2 to 3 years, ever since Greece essentially entered this crisis. And savers have been slowly yet steadily withdrawing money from Greek banks and moving it either abroad or under their mattress. I think well over 70 billion euros have actually left the Greek banking system in the last 3 years. I'm not sure about this figure, but I think this is what I read. This week, the first 2 days of the week, 1.2 billion euros left the banks. But I have to say that there is also another question here. We're talking about the savers that are withdrawing money, but there's a lot of people in Greece that don't have enough money to make their bills at the end of the month. And that's another issue. So there's some people that are trying to essentially make sure that whatever they have saved is, somewhere safely kept. But there is others that are simply laughing at the idea of a bank run and saying, what bank run? I'm indebted and I can't pay my bills. So there is this big antithesis here in Greece, definitely. But I would also like to go back to this lazy point, because this is being mentioned very often. And the question of reforms we had before that Martina was talking about. I certainly agree with her, but I think a problem with Greece and a problem with why the Greek economy isn't working isn't so much that the Greeks are lazy, which they certainly aren't, or that there aren't jobs, which there aren't. But yes, it's that it's very hard in Greece to actually create jobs, because bureaucracy, and especially at a very, very low level, is essentially nerve-wracking. I was just talking to 7 people. It took them 72 days to get the tax number so that they could actually bill their clients. And this is a very basic problem. Greeks essentially, even if they do want to work and even if they have great business ideas, they can't put them into practice because of this bureaucracy. And I would say that this has a lot to do with this crisis, certainly in Greece.
Okay, Maria, we don't want to offend any of you who are with us right now, but we do want to bring you this comment from Yanis, who is writing on the Huffington Post. Let's, for argument's sake, concede that we Greeks are spendthrift, lazy, corrupt, deficit-prone usurpers of other Europeans' hard labour. What of the Spaniards, Yanis is asking. Alicia, how do you feel when you hear a comment like that?
Like, I couldn't hear it.
Oh, okay. This is just this ongoing theme from so many comments. People accusing the Greeks and the Spaniards of being lazy, basically.
Yeah, but that's not true. That's a generalization. I don't think it's fair at all. I think people are looking for a job, but there aren't jobs for anybody. It's not a problem of each person. There are too many people unemployed, and there's no work for all of them. So we need to restructure the whole economy so that there are jobs for everybody.
Martina, just to bring you in, that comment was, of course, sent to us by a Greek, so a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but it does follow a certain theme that we have been seeing on our Facebook page and also on Twitter. People commenting there about the different work ethic in the countries. There's a real cultural difference, though, isn't there, when looking at solutions to resolving this massive problem?
Well, I don't think there's anything in the Southern Mediterranean DNA that makes people lazy. What I would agree with is that there's structural problems with the labor market and the economies that over several generations are not conducive to developing a strong or rather northern-style work ethic. That is not to say that people are not qualified. That is not to say that people are inherently lazy.
But Martina,
that is to say that there are structural problems.
But Martina, is there this worry that Angela Merkel is going to say, you've got to take your medicine?
I'm sorry, I don't see the relevance between that question and the previous question. Angela Merkel says take your medicine because there's been absolutely irresponsible fiscal behavior in Greece and in other countries, including, for example, Spain, for example, Italy, which has a massive debt to GDP ratio. And Angela Merkel is right to say that. And it's absolutely economic orthodoxy that countries shouldn't run massive deficits and debts that they can't finance. That's not rocket science, and it's nothing eye-opening particularly. I would agree with an economist who spoke a little earlier, my friend, I didn't catch his name, who said, of course, fiscal prudence is desirable, and it's a good path, and it's the way countries should be run, but also too much austerity too fast, as we've seen in Greece, and badly implemented austerity at that, could be disastrous and could eventually kill the patient. That's exactly where we need to start calibrating the program for Greece.
Okay, Martina, thanks for that. We're going to bring you more comments. Lots are coming in a moment. Do stay with us here on World Have Your Say. Welcome back to World Have Your Say. We're talking about the future of the Eurozone. Let's take you straight to Nuala in the World Service newsroom, who's been fielding some calls. Nuala.
Hey Lucy, well, more countries, more people with different comments coming in. Kendrick in Hong Kong just called us. He says it's posing great problems here. It's devastating. The stock has not been steady. It is bad news. And uncertainty, a lot of people are blaming that instead of saying that it's an actual crisis. It's the emotions around it. John, a British expat living in Connecticut in the States, says we have to help Greece. The euro is so overvalued. The banks have got people into this mess and should help them out of it again. Get poor Greece back on track as soon as possible. So a vote of sympathy there. Saul from Greece says, I work with the EU and I live in Greece. Everyone is impatient. The money that was coming to Greece through the bailout, that was just phase one. I hope that Greece holds on and that there is a secondary plan. If it goes to the drachma, it will collapse. And Joanna from Spain called the show. She says that the south of Europe is divided by politics only, and that this is not about finances, it's about politics. Now, the political parties just make mistakes and just carry on regardless, she says. It's a war between left and right. Well, I don't know what your guests think, whether this is really just about politics. You can post at facebook.com/worldhaveyoursay.
Nuala, thanks for that, and thanks for all your comments. I wanted to bring in Dr. Christian Schultz with a question that we've been getting from a number of people, particularly on Twitter. At London_econ has tweeted us and said, option 2 for Greece, leave the euro, devalue and default. It worked for Argentina. Dr. Schultz, Argentina keeps coming up.
Well, Argentina is, of course, an example of a country that had a currency bought with the US dollar, then left. And if you look at growth rates, at least in Argentinian money, then Argentina looks like it survived that break in the early 2000s and is doing quite well these days. But I wonder if you ask Argentinians themselves if they're happy about what happened at the time and if they really think that their living standards have improved over the last 10 years, first of all. And the second problem, of course, with this argument is Greece the same as Argentina? Argentina is a big country, far away from us here in Europe, in South America. It has massive natural resources that it can resort to build things, to sell things abroad, and to obtain foreign exchange, to buy other goods. All these things are not exactly the same in Greece. Plus, Argentina is more of an emerging economy. It has more political flexibility, less rigidities than Greece. And my biggest worry about Greece leaving the euro is always that the reforms that it really needs, not the wage cuts and the fiscal reforms, the reforms it really needs, and we've heard this many times today, the rigidities, the bureaucracy, the complicated tax system, all these things will not be solved if Greece leaves the euro.
Thanks for that. Martina, is there any reason to believe that Greeks are going to vote differently in the elections coming up?
I think there really is. In fact, there was a poll last night, or yesterday rather, that already showed that New Democracy, the Conservative Party, had a small lead over Syriza. So we believed that there was a trend in favor of anti-austerity parties, especially Syriza, the coalition of the radical left. Already in polls, that seems to be not that clear because, I mean, it's too early to say and the situation is extremely changeable. So we shouldn't be drawing final conclusions, but the polling that we see, but it's important to heed those polls. What I think is that the messages from Angela Merkel, from José Manuel Barroso, the president of the European Commission, and from other leaders around Europe, that this vote will be a referendum on whether or not to stay in the euro. Those have scared Greeks, essentially. And some Greeks feel that they want to play it safe, potentially, by voting for a very unequivocally, clearly pro-bailout party like New Democracy or other parties similar to that. I think, however, and that's just an aside note, that kind of rhetoric from European leaders could also backfire and anger Greeks more, who might say, you're blackmailing us. You are prepared to punish us for the way we feel we democratically have a right to vote. You can't punish us for the way we vote, and you can't punish us for rejecting these very tough austerity measures rather than rejecting the euro. We want the euro, we don't want the austerity.
Okay, thanks for that, Martina. Professor Schwartz in Madrid, if I could bring you a question from John here in London, who has tweeted us asking, can Greece actually be forced out of the euro, even if it could be desirable?
No, I think that would be against the treaty. The Greeks would have a vote, and in fact, the treaty allows, the Lisbon Treaty only allows a country to leave if it wants, but not other countries to force you out, and the same for the euro. So no, Greece cannot be forced out. It may leave on its own. I would like to say something on Argentina, which I visit. Argentina now has a 30% rate of inflation. The government says 10%, and they fine people who say it's more because they create confusion. Then the president took away, nationalized all savings for pensions. Private pensions were taken by the state. And then she fired the governor of the central bank to take all the gold and dollars that they have in the central bank. And now they're beginning to nationalize foreign companies and keep them without pay. I don't think it's an example for anyone.
Okay, Professor Schwartz, thanks for that. If I could ask you, Dr. Schultz, a comment from Stuart, who's in Greece. This debt should have been spread over 40 or 50 years. These measures are causing real hardship. So just asking a question there about the timescale of some of these measures.
Well, Greece has built a huge debt pile, and we've had in March this private sector debt cut, this debt swap, which cut the Greek debts by a considerable amount. Unfortunately, in the numbers, it still looks pretty bad, but that's mainly because some of the private sector debt was exchanged for official sector debt. But the debt pile, in any case, however you calculate it, is the highest in the world, or at least in any developed country, and it will take a very, very long time to repay it.
Okay.
But that's time that Europe can afford. Greece is a small country by European standards. It's only 2.2% of European or Eurozone GDP.
Okay, Dr. Schultz, thank you very much. I wanted to leave you with one tweet that amused us from Coleman Dublin, who says the rain in Spain falls mainly on Germany. And with that, we end this edition of World Have Your Say. Thanks very much for being with us.